So let's talk about the first million in recurring revenue. So it is a really big deal. And the way I see it as kind of like the threshold of viability in general. So I think before you get to a million, for the most part, what you're trying to do is pathfind and see if you can figure out a way to get there. Once you get there, 9 times out of 10, you've got some repeatability and you've figured out some patterns and you know who your customer is and where your strengths and weaknesses are. And from there, it's really, you're also probably not going to die. And so once you get to a million in revenue, the concept of end of the runway kind of goes away, which is really, really nice. So past a million, what you're trying to do is find repeatability and efficiency and scalability and find a way to get to 2 and 3 and 4. And chances are, if you can get to 1, getting to 2 is really not as hard. It's just not. So that's why it's such a big deal. I think I kind of break that out here a little bit. But recurring revenue is great because your costs are recurring, your payroll is recurring, your bills are recurring. I also mentioned this survival. So you can actually support a skeleton team with $1 million. I mean, the business I run now is a cash flow business. We don't really have runway. If we thought of it that way, we'd have like 2 weeks of runway at any point in time because we just get our bills, we pay our payroll, get our bills, pay our payroll. Once you're at $1 million in run rate, you have that option. I'm not saying you necessarily should do that. Usually you want to keep the speed up and try to take over a market. So that's why you raise money and you go into cash flow negative and all this other stuff. But if you really needed to, you could go into survival mode and no one can stop you. Then you can dictate your own future. The viability thing I mentioned, if you can get to 1, you can probably get to 2 or 3. As long as your market is big, you can go past that. And then scalability, you'll start to see things that work that you can really double down on. And the really interesting thing here is, if you know what you're doing, you can build a story for investors where you can say, hey, we got here with X, we could 10X this or 20X this, and now boom, look, we're at this. Because you have some proof points. So once you get some proof points, you can model out future growth and tell a story so that you can go and raise some capital. Okay, so I mentioned we wouldn't do too much about tactical stuff. There are some cases, maybe some stories, anecdotes where we can do some tactical work, but this is more of a psychological journey. So that's what we're going to talk about here. And the psychological journey, in my view, has 4 distinct chapters, and they sort of roughly correlate to certain amounts of revenue. I'll go through some pitfalls and some pro tips and maybe some examples of each one of these. I guess to sum it up, the first chapter is $0 to $1. It's $1. This is actually a long chapter. It seems silly and small, but so many folks are pre-revenue for like a year or more. So it's a long one. It's probably psychologically the thorniest, I think, because you're like, what the hell am I doing with myself? And like, you waffle between thinking you're going to be a billionaire in 2 years and being sleeping on your mom's couch. And you're kind of timid and like, maybe you take it out and get feedback. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'll talk about that a little bit. From 1 to 100K is a little different. That's where, and we have really strict rules around what counts here, by the way. I'm going to say this probably 20 times. If you're selling to your best friend or your rich uncle or your golden retriever, it doesn't count. So this is like to strangers, okay? But if you can get to 100K of sales to strangers who really need it, that's a proof point that you can actually, that it is it's something that can be sold. And you'd be surprised, some things are actually really tough to sell. But if you get to 100K, that's a huge milestone. You can't really live off of it. It doesn't really change much financially. But you're proven now that it can be sold to strangers, which is really important. From 100 to 300K, you're still kind of doing a lot of one-off stuff here. You're pathfinding and you're trying to figure out even just tiny little, you're like a detective. You're trying to find little bits of repeatability around the way that you're selling. And 300K is actually an interesting number because I remember I raised a seed round about 3 years ago. It's about $4 million from the folks here. And 300K was actually a number that I heard a lot. So a lot of pre-seed and seed investors have that as a threshold, particularly in pre-seed and seed as well. I think the thought is if you can get to 300, you can probably get to $1 million, and they're VCs, so they're trying to like get a discount, but they know that they can get to the milestone. But what you're trying to do as an entrepreneur is figure out little bits and pieces of detective work and getting to repeatability and getting to the persona who buys it and all these other things. And then from 300K to a million, and typically 300K, most founder CEOs can probably get you there. You know, the founder CEO can do a lot of the work and get you there. 300 to a million is the sort of sprint to the finish line. And that, I think it's an important chapter because this is where you may start to have other team members doing it too. Doing the selling and doing the customer success and doing all the sort of management. So that one's more about team building and seeing if you can actually train and seeing if you can. Every founder CEO loves to think that they're the only ones that can do it. That's actually a bad thing. If that's the case, like shame on you, then you're just going to be a solo entrepreneur and enjoy your agency. But if you want a big scalable tech company, you have to be able to train other people and you have to be able to do that again and again and again. So usually to get to a million, that's when you start to see the first business hire, the first sales hire, maybe the first BDR team. You know, that's more, it's almost more of an interpersonal sort of progress milestone. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to drill into some of these and we can sort of discuss them and then we can open up for questions. So this pre-revenue chapter, again, these are the dark ages usually. So you want to go out there and see if you can receive any revenue at all for your product. So go out and get people to sign up, discount wildly. But the biggest thing is discount. Like if anyone's doing it as a favor to you, I would say just don't even do it. But you know, like I wouldn't take that seriously at all. In fact, I see companies go down pitfalls. So when you see a founder CEO who's really well connected and has a lot of friends, and they sell to all their friends, like YC is notorious for this. All the little YC companies will go and buy from each other, and they'll see this big revenue spike, but no outsider gives a shit, and it's misleading. And that's a danger for you too as a founder, because you may give yourself a pat on the back and be like, "Oh, we're going to be rich. This is great," but you know, it's not. That's not the market speaking. That's just your popularity contest speaking. So it's a really, really important thing. I try to not call friends as much as possible because I want to know as a founder, does this extend out into the broader market as something that's appealing? So that's the biggest pitfall I see in this pre-revenue stage. Be prepared to do a lot of hand-holding and services. It almost will feel like a professional services engagement at this point in time, because you'll be out there doing a lot of the work that the software is supposed to be doing. Don't worry about that. That's fine. I think Paul Graham has this famous essay where he says, "Do things that don't scale." So that is important here. Like, don't think about, "Hey, will this work when I have a team of 100?" Like, get over yourself. You don't have a team of 100. Do it yourself. Provide the services, build the output of the product manually, even if you need to. Don't worry about that. There's probably going to be some refund requests. There's probably going to be some really thorny deal saving activity. There's probably going to be some 2 or 3 hour long support sessions where you have to really coach people through whatever they're doing. But what you really want is a complete stranger who doesn't care if you live or die and not trying to do you any favors. They're trying to save their jobs and look good to their boss, same as everyone else. And you want them to pay even $10 for your product. And if you can get that to happen, that's a really big milestone. Couple pro tips just from all the folks we've worked with. The R&D and stealth mode thing. I don't know how else to say this. I find it extremely frustrating. It's a little bit it's a little arrogant, I think, when people are like, "Oh, I can't really tell you. Oh, I can't disclose. Oh, we're in stealth mode." Like, it's as if the whole world were out there trying to copy them, which is never really the case. I actually see it as a sign of timidness. It's like timidness cloaked as arrogance, and I find it really, really frustrating. Now, maybe, okay, and there's exceptions to this, obviously. If you're I don't know, in some super deep research thing and you have some physics breakthrough and you don't want other scientists to know about your physics breakthrough, okay, fine, that's cool, whatever. If you're doing research for the CIA or something, okay, cool, that's fine. But 9 times out of 10, it's way better that you get the bad feedback and the gut punch early. And if you can't really get people excited about it quickly, then that's a sign. And even just getting a couple dozen reps in will get you better at being conversant about it and getting attention and stuff like that. But I just find it really frustrating and really damaging, actually, when founders try to like act as if it's like this ultra secretive thing and nobody can know about it. Like that to me is usually a red flag. It also usually means that they'll wait way too long to start to release things, and then B, when they do release it, they have no idea how to talk about it, and they have no idea what the pushbacks will be, and like all these other things. So I think the safety blanket can really damage more than it helps there. And that's kind of bullet point 2 as well. So, you want to be out there talking to folks even before it's fully baked. You want to get really good at talking about it in a way that you can get people excited in 1 sentence or 2 sentences. We do a lot of cold calling. Obviously, it's kind of just the name of the game in early sales. And it's a great test. It's so humbling, but it's an incredible test to see if you can get someone to listen to you for 15 seconds when you piss them off like crazy and busted into their day and made their, like, interrupted whatever they're doing, right? You can get them to listen to you for 2 minutes, you're onto something. And that's actually way harder than you think, and it's way more valuable than you think. So we're big proponents of that. And then I mentioned it before, but try to get some dollars for it, even if it's discounted, fees are waived, whatever. If you can get some kind of a signature on a DocuSign and some amount of dollars, especially if you're B2B, because if you're B2B, that means you went through legal and you went through whatever. So like we had one big deal. The company I was most recently involved in sold into SAP. And I think we charged them $10 a month or something like that. And this was for a team of 50. And we framed it as like a 98% discount off of list. And it still took 8 weeks to get through procurement and, vetting and red lines and paperwork and some, VP trying to be important, trying to say, oh, but what about this and blah, blah, blah. Didn't matter. We got that $10 and we were so happy because it very quickly grew to be a 6-figure deal. Once you're through, you're an approved vendor. You've done everything. They vetted you. They've done all the tests. Like that was worth millions to us over time, but we just knew that we needed to get through. You got to puncture through all of the gatekeepers and barriers, and you don't want, like, you can make dollars less of an issue, but the big thing is puncturing through all those gatekeepers. So always try to get something. You got to get something. Your incentive, you'll probably instinctively give free trials and all these other things. Eventually you got to hold the line and say, hey, listen, we need to charge something. We can do 98% discount, whatever you want, but we've got to get you on paperwork. It's our own liability. Just make some shit up. It's our own liability. We we're not protected here. You get it, blah, blah, blah. But try to get some dollars for what you're doing, and don't let them bully you and steamroll you into getting free trials. Also, free trials often don't convert the way you might think because people don't take it seriously, really. They'll take it more seriously if they had to go and get a signature from their boss, even if there's no money. And they'll take it more seriously if they had to go and get $50 or $100 or $10, even if it's like not a big deal. But that's the only, it drives their attention and their buy-in. Okay, so that's getting to your first dollar. Let's talk about getting to that 100K mark. So now we're focusing on a couple of different things. So we know that we can get a stranger to buy. We know we can get them to get through all the paperwork, all that stuff. To get to 100K, this is an important milestone to me because I see it as a number where you can't really get there on flukes. So what this means is that a group of smaller decisions or maybe a smaller number of bigger decisions were made, but it was enough, pain, and spending money is pain. So you're getting people to go through enough spending money pain to get to 100K. And it means that there's something there. That means that it's not a fluke. It wasn't just you happen to find some person who happened to need it. It's probably, there's probably more of a market there. You might start to see some trends, although really you're looking for trends getting up to 300K. But at least have the mindset to be looking for trends. You're going to have a ton of stall deals. You're going to have a ton of window shoppers. You're going to have a ton of discovery meetings that end up going nowhere, and you'll get ghosted a lot. That's just expect that, don't let it hurt your feelings. But that's going to be a part of this chapter. The big goal here again is just close as many as you can. Don't sweat the ones that you can't, and just go. And just keep an eye out for repeatable things. Like you might, again, you're like a detective, so you might say, oh, this person had the same title, or this person had the same trigger caused them to even take the meeting maybe 2 or 3 times, right? So you might start to see little bits and pieces of that. I'd say so for the pro tips for this chapter, I'd say you want to focus more on deal volume and velocity. Don't worry about a playbook, I don't think. I mean, have some materials, throw them up there, but because you're still kind of pathfinding here pretty hard, don't get into the trap of trying to make your processes perfect or your playbook perfect. It's not helpful. Try to get in front of as many people as you can, get as conversant as you can in terms of getting to the point quickly and letting them talk, and like figure out what you need to ask them to get them interested and stuff like that. And then just try to get as many at-bats and as many deals as you can into your pipeline. Don't get disheartened. I already mentioned this. This is going to be depressing. A lot of people will ghost you, very sad. You're going to send lots of double, triple, quadruple emails and texts and things like that. That's just the way it is. Just do it. It doesn't mean you suck. It just means you didn't get the right person at the right time. There's plenty, the world is massive. The world is vast. There's tons of opportunity everywhere. And then the big thing at the bottom, I see this happen a lot, and it's really more about price points than anything. You don't necessarily have any clue what the right pricing strategy is or the right price, but man, deliver it with cojones. This is what we charge. This is what it's worth. And then you can say, now for a pilot, we can do a 90. Then you can actually discount it. It's fine, but you need to deliver it with conviction. What I see, the reason I bring this up is may seem like an odd tangent, but so many early stage founders are like, well, the pricing could be around this. We kind of wanted to ask you what you think might be appropriate. Like, not only does that mean they're going to try to walk all over you, but also they just don't think it triggers the rookie spidey sense. And if you're doing B2B, this is like a bit of a tangent, but if you're doing B2B, the worst thing you can possibly do is let anyone know that you're early and new and small. B2C is a little different, but B2B, okay, so here's the psychology of B2B. And a lot of you guys have had regular jobs. I mean, I've had a regular job, we've all had regular jobs. People with regular salaries and regular jobs, their biggest fear is getting fired. And their biggest fear is looking bad to their boss. And it's not even about the dollars. It's not their fucking money. They don't care. But it's about their career stability and the optics and like the politics with their boss and with their peers and whatever. Their biggest fear is that they're going to make a decision or lead their boss to make a decision that makes them look stupid. So anytime you show that you're like this garage band kind of try hard, but like don't really know what you're doing thing, it's a nightmare. And I would even go ahead and say, don't even talk about your CEO title if you're a CEO or founder. Like, don't do that. If you're going B2B, don't give them the TED talk that you give to investors. Don't do this lofty, oh, we're transforming the industry and this big shift, and we went to the best schools and we transformed this at Google and blah, blah, blah. They couldn't care less. And even more than that, they will dislike you because it's like arrogant and pretentious, and they don't want to be spoken down to a vendor. Now, do that all day long with your investors, because investors eat up that pretentious shit, but don't like do it to your customers ever. And I see founder CEOs always making this mistake, like always, because they can't switch gears. They're out there doing the TED talk and trying to be arrogant and pretentious because investors like it. But then they go to their customers and they do it too. And their customer is just some VP in Idaho who's like, what the hell? I don't give a shit. Like, I just want to solve my problem. So, sorry, it's a bit of a tangent there, but I see that all the time. And it kind of just couples into this whole thing. So deliver pricing with conviction, and don't ever sort of let pull the curtain back that you're a tiny company trying to figure it out. Do everything you can not to do that, and be really careful with the tone that you're setting. And I think like this usually becomes most obvious to me in this like 100K kind of chapter, because this is where I see most people continue to do sort of VC talk. They do VC talk to customers, and it like bites them in the ass. So you got to deliver pricing with confidence, and make sure you realize that you need to switch your persona a little bit and just be like a useful, one of the guys, kind of like peer, like helpful peer to your customers, not this like luminary Steve Jobs BS. So that's like a really big thing there. Usually most people figure that out around 100K, but I wanted to like make that really obvious. Okay, so from 100K to 300K, this is the fun part. Well, maybe 300K to $1 million. It's all fun. 100K to 300K is an interesting one, because this is where you're really in pattern finding mode. So this is where, you know, all the detective stuff that you can possibly throw at it, do it. So start to think about what triggered the person to take a conversation with you. Think about what was it about their title or their background that led them to be interested. What types of intros worked, what types didn't, what types of sort of product narrative works and which ones didn't, what competitors maybe you're hearing about. You're just looking for any sort of patterns that emerge, because to get to 300K in deals or in revenue, you know, you need a couple dozen, maybe even 100 contracts, depending on your contract size. And you know, you're going to start to spot some patterns. That's the most powerful thing you can do. And you can probably still do most of this as founder led. You know, this can still be pretty much founder led. You might have another salesperson, or maybe some of your other folks on your early team can help you. But this can still be, even if it's using an agency like ours or using a salesperson or something, the founder's got to be really dialed into this, because they're going to see patterns and be able to action them way quicker. It's about spotting the patterns and actioning them really quickly. So you can't say, okay, once a month we're going to review things and then maybe adjust the way we're doing things. It's like daily, like, okay, this worked, let's double down. This worked, let's double down. This failed, let's kill it. Like really quickly, because you're trying to spot those patterns and dig into it. But the main thing is you want to know who buys it and what they use it for. And those are the biggest data points that you're looking for. Okay, so again, I'm going to say this: do things that don't scale. In the service of trying to be a detective, spend a lot more time than you need to talking to folks. You know, go to their events, try to figure out what do they do? What newspapers do they read? Well, newspapers dated. What memes do they enjoy? I don't know what it is these days. What is it that really works for this audience? And just really get to know them on a super deep level. It's worth doing in this stage maybe a little bit more, because you have the patterns already a little bit. So you kind of have a hunch that some persona type is really your persona type. Don't worry about doing things manually. Try to save every turn you possibly can, like just beg and plead and offer to make changes or do whatever. You'd be surprised at what can be turned around. A lot of things can be turned around. Most people want to work with someone who will do whatever it takes. So if you just show them that you'll do whatever it takes, they'll probably stick with you, even if they didn't like it or something went wrong. So that's a really big one. The other big thing I see, and this is again on that kind of sort of arrogant rant that I was going on. Don't be arrogant. A lot of founder CEOs will delegate things, and that's fine for some things. But don't delegate customer contact stuff just yet. Or if you do it with them and listen to the recordings and still try to get all the notes that you can. So, and this is funny for me to say, because I run an agency that sets up sales teams for early companies. But even when they work with us, if the founder's checked out, I know the project's probably not going to work. If the founder's just like, hey, Andrew, get your team to go make 100 calls a day. All right, bye. It's doomed. Now, the ones where it works really well is where the founder's doing the training and they're sort of co-piloting the calls, they're listening to all the notes, and then they're giving the feedback, and they're really committed to making the sort of handoff of knowledge work in both directions, because they need the knowledge back too. They need to know what works, what didn't, so on and so forth. So don't resist the urge to be above anything. And this is a slippery, weird one, because it's really it's like a blind spot for a lot of people. Like nobody wants to pick up the phone and try to call 50 people and hear no 50 times. Nobody wants to send a bunch of emails that they know probably aren't going to work, or send these like really eager beaver LinkedIn messages to 100 people, or like go to a conference and like try to shake 100 hands or whatever. Or maybe that's crazy, but like maybe 25, like meet 25 new people at a conference or something like that. It's one of those things where it's human nature to shy away from it and to procrastinate. Oh shoot, I'm busy today. Oh man, I'll have to do it tomorrow. I'll have to do it tomorrow. It's kind of like flossing your teeth or something like that. It's like, yeah, I know I need to do it. I'll do it next week, whatever. That you got to push through that discomfort like hardcore as a founder CEO. So nothing's beneath you. Do the thing that makes you uncomfortable. Expose yourself to the pain. Like expose yourself to the customer and market rejection. I'm a huge believer in that. Like get comfortable with rejection and don't shy away from it. It's human nature. Every little instinct in your brain is going to be like, no, you're busy. Oh, go do this other thing. Go make sure the spreadsheet is perfect. And like, oh, go build your investor report or whatever. Like, screw that. You have to go and get in there and feel the rejection and feel it, and steer the ship in accordance to that. Okay. And by the way, I see that at all levels. Like even at the big companies we've worked with, CEOs and execs and even boards, like they'll just bury their way into like operational tweaks and upgrades, but they're not listening to the market, and the market will be changing. And they're like, I call it polishing brass on the Titanic. They'll go and busily start polishing brass, but like what they need to do is get in the steering room and listen to the market and move the ship. We all know how that one ended. Okay, 300K plus. So again, 300K is a real number. I hear this from a lot of VCs. Again, I think the idea is just that if you can get to 300, you can get to $1 million. And what they're trying to do is get a lower price. So they might get a pre-seed price at 300K, but they know that you probably can get to $1 million and do a seed. So a lot of VCs see it as like a big validation point for very early stage. Now, so that's sort of externally facing. Inwardly facing, what you're going to want to do, operationally speaking, is like this is the human part. Usually, up until this point, you can do it with a really small team. The founding team can do a lot of it, especially on the customer side. Usually, the CEO or whoever's the most extroverted is out there doing most of it. But to get from 300 to $1 million, your challenge is to see if you can create a mini-me and get them to be successful. So try to hire a couple folks, try to train them up. If they don't work, that's fine. Find another one. Try to think if it's really their fault, or if really, like, you kind of have to be a little self-critical here, because a lot of times it's easy to finger point if something's not working, but most employees actually are used to just having a framework already, and it's on you as a business owner to build that framework. So you got to be pretty self-critical here. But still, if the chemistry doesn't work, you can let them go, try someone else, whatever. But really take it on yourself to build a work environment. Most employees have a hard time thinking about work environment at all. They're used to just stepping into a work environment where they know what they need to do. They know what's next. They know, all the pieces. In a startup, that's not the case. So you could hire someone who has a great track record at Oracle or whatever, and they completely fail because there's no work environment at all and no one's ever heard of them. So you got to be a little bit self-critical here. But this is the chapter where you sort of have your pathfinding more or less there, and you're trying to see if you can amplify your own impact as a founder CEO. So you slowly learn to trust other people in different roles. Again, you're trying to build on this repeatability and scalability, not only just from a customer standpoint, but also from an internal team kind of operating structure standpoint. And the big thing here is, this is where you can actually start to build a model. Like, you can build a forecast at this point. Hopefully, if you do this right, you can say, all right, I hired a BDR. It took a few months, but now the BDR can find 20 opportunities a month, every month. And 15% of those opportunities will close, but it takes 3 months or whatever. I'm just making stuff up. But think about that for a second. If you're in $1 billion or $2 billion or $5 billion market, like what most VCs want to see, even just those building blocks I gave you, you can now create a path to 100 million in revenue. Not that it's that valid, that's a little extreme, but you can certainly create a plausible path to $1 million, 5 million, 10 million, because you know that this BDR will create this much opportunity and it'll convert. And if you were to hire 4 of them, okay, now you got this much pipeline, it'll convert in this way, and so on and so forth. So you're starting to build the building blocks of that level of forecasting in this chapter. And that's why it's important that you hire someone. Even if you think you can keep doing it yourself, don't. Try to see if you can do it through someone else, because you're not going to be a $1 billion company with the founder doing all the sales. It's never going to work that way. And it helps investors as well to see that you have the ability and the magnetism to bring in great hires, train them, and then get those sort of building blocks for the future. Pro tips. This one's a little dicey. This one's actually burned me before, but I'm still going to stick to it. Try to let some things just happen on their own. Like, let the chips fall where they may with your team, and then fix the process. And if you need to switch out the people, or train the people, develop the people, do that. But try to not solve the problem yourself. You know, there's a little bit of like, let your kid get a few bruises. You know what I mean? So I think at this stage, like, you want to try to start to see if problems can solve themselves. It's a really important thing as a founder CEO to fire yourself. Like, you got to think about firing yourself constantly, because you're doing 20 jobs at the beginning, but then slowly see if you can fire yourself and see if the world falls apart. And if it doesn't, that's fantastic. Sometimes people's egos hate that because they want to be vital to everything. And I've seen that too. That's a big problem. Sometimes people want to feel important to every little thing. And I think that actually is bad. Like, that will prevent you from scaling. And the other thing is the kudos and the ownership and the high fives and all that stuff. You know, again, this is another weird psychological thing. Founders are often ego heavy people. And, you know, it's like, oh, I did this, I did that. Try to shy away from that. Give kudos to the team, give props to the team, let decisions be made by the team, let the team do things without you. Give them credit as much as you possibly can. You're going to get the credit anyways if it works. Like, don't worry about it. Like, you don't need to go and fucking tell people that you're amazing. But your employees maybe would benefit from that a lot. So I'm a big believer in servant leadership. Like, I was a busboy for 5 years. Like, I was like lowest of the totem pole. And I really enjoyed it. If you can get your ego out of the way, it's really fun. You're just filling up water glasses and clearing tables. You get to meet a bunch of people. There's like, you know, I don't know, it's fun. But that sort of, like, I try to keep that mindset no matter how fancy my title is or how big my team is or whatever. You're there to support the people doing the real thing. And the people doing the real thing over time, now at the early days it's different, but over time, the people doing the real thing will be your 50 salespeople and your 200 engineers and your, you know, whatever, big customer success team. So get in the habit of giving kudos and lifting up your team and making sure that they're self-sufficient and able to run on their own without you. And then the other thing I would say, and this is just, again, it's not always intuitive to founders, but it just helps employees a lot, but build some consistency around messaging and contact and be accessible. So this is where you start to see more weekly meetings and monthly, and maybe you do a quarterly review or a year in review or something like that. Just get in the habit of it. You don't have a board yet under 100 million or under $1 million usually. You might not even have very serious investors. You might have a handful of safe notes floating around. But the earlier you can get into the habit of giving these, like, just getting the rhythm of things with updates and sort of metrics and glancing at what you said you were going to do and what you're going to do, and just making sure it all aligns. And then I think that's the end of my deck. Once you hit $1 million, doesn't mean the game is over. It's kind of just begun, because why aren't you at 10 or 50 or 100 or whatever? But at the very least, you're not going to die because you got some income. You can keep a team going. And then it gets really, really challenging. I mean, it gets more challenging in different ways from there. But I would actually say most of the job from $1 million onwards is around everything I just said for this 300K to $1 million. It's just a further development of that, because now you're working through people more. So you're working through your team, you're working through the individual contributors and the, you know, vendors and all that stuff. So so it is actually a very different skill set. So getting from 0 to 1 is a very different skill set from getting to 1 to 10. And then I would say 10 to 100 is very, like, bureaucratic at that point. Like you're building complex models and spreadsheets and you're dealing with the board and sort of trying to hit forecast. It's really just a development of the same stuff that you were doing earlier. But all the gritty, like pathfinding and doing it all yourself, all that goes away. So you almost have to be a different person. So 0 to 1, you're kind of in a different headspace completely than 1 and onwards. But I guess what I'm trying to say is even the difference between 1 to 10 and 10 to 100 aren't as big as the difference between getting from 0 to 1. I think that's been my experience. Getting to the 10 and the 50 and the 100 is it's really just a higher gravity version of the same thing. But getting from 0 to 1 is like like you're a different species. Getting from 0 to 1, like it's a very different headspace. Like you're the busboy doing all this crap, getting kicked every day. It's like pathfinding, putting things together. Like it's a very different skill set.